Welcome back, coders. I'm Ethan with Project Game Changer, and today we are going to continue making your first Space Duel game using Tynker. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, the first thing that we'll do this time is make sure that the ships stay in the screen. Because right now, you can see if we move the ships, they can go outside of the screen, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is go to player 1, stop the game, and drag in 2 on starts. Now, let's add 2 forever ifs. These will check when the ship touches the bottom or top of the screen. So if we go to operators, then scroll down and find the less than and greater than blocks, we can drag those into the forever if blocks. And what we're going to do is if it is touching the edge, we will push it back into the screen. So let's go to motion and find Y position. Remember, this is how far up or down the ship is on the screen. So we want to push it back to the bottom if it touches the bottom edge, which for us, that's minus 384. That might be different for you, but I'll go with negative 384 because that's the lower edge of the screen, and greater than 384. Blocks inside of the forever if will run when the ship touches the edge of the screen. When the ship touches the bottom edge, we will set Y, which is the distance up and down, back to negative 384. And if it goes outside of the top, we will bring it back into the top of the screen, which is positive 384. So now for player 1, if I press play, I can move up and down and it will stop at the edge of the screen. Perfect. Now let's copy the code to the second player by dragging the blocks over. And since this one doesn't use a different arrow key or something to check whether the ship is inside or outside of the screen, you don't need to change the code at all. It'll automatically work for the second player. Great. You can see when we play our project, we can move the ships up and down, and they will stay inside of the screen. You can also shoot the bullets, and they can hit the other ship. But they don't really do anything yet. So let's change that. Click on bullet 1, and we're going to actually put this on the same rule where it touches player 2. When player 1's bullet hits player 2, we will make an explosion effect, add points to player 1's score, and add a sound. We'll do the same thing for player 2 right after this. To make the explosion effect, we are going to use what's called a costume. You can click on the settings button next to bullet 1 and then click on add costume. The one that we want will be under space, and we are going to use the sun. I know it's called the sun, but it actually does look like an explosion, so let's use that. Let's also add the costume to player 2. And one thing that I forgot to do is start as the blue dot still. So let's click on this to set it as the default costume. I'll do the same thing for player 1. Great. Now that we have the costume, we can actually use a block to switch to that costume when the bullet hits the ship. We can actually just search for a block if we don't know where to find it, by typing into this search box. After we find the switch to costume block, let's drag it in before destroying the clone. Then we'll set the costume to sun. And we actually want it to wait there for a very short amount of time. So we'll find the wait block and drag it in. And for me, it's going to be less than 1/10 of a second. If I press play and then I shoot the bullet, you can see that it shows the sun costume when the bullet hits. Now the next thing we can do is actually add a sound. So let's go to sound on the left, and let's just find play sound and drag it in right by switch costume. Now the sound I am going to be using will be under sci-fi, and it will be this one over here. So I'll click the speaker, and that's going to be my sound. So when the bullet hits the other player, it is going to make the sound and show the costume. Now let's quickly just copy this code over to bullet 2. What we are going to do next is create a variable. If you don't remember what a variable is, it's like a piece of paper. You can use it to track things. We're going to use a variable to keep track of the score of both player 1 and player 2. And since we're going to write this on the screen, let's go to Stage, then create the variable. Also, we want to reset it to 0 when we stop the game. Let's create player 1 score and player 2 score. And don't forget to also reset this one to 0 when the game stops. Now, we want this to increase when the bullets hit the other player's ship. So for bullet 1, when it touches player 2, we are going to change the score of player 1, and we're going to increase it by 1. So when bullet 1 hits player 2, the person who shot it, player 1, will get a point added to their score. Let's copy this code to player 2 as well. Except when player 2's bullet hits player 1, we want to increase player 2's score by 1 point. The only thing that we have to do with the bullet now is add a sound when you actually fire it. And we're going to do that when the clone is created. Let's go back to sound and drag in play sound and put it right before the forever block. I'm going to add a sound, and I'm going to use this one. So I'll click the speaker, and now bullet 2 is going to make the sound when I fire it. Let's also do the same thing for player 1. Now, when we press play, we can fire a bullet, and it will make a sound. And if that bullet hits, it will also play an explosion. Great, we have an awesome game so far. But wouldn't it be nice if there was a timer so that the fighting wouldn't go on forever? Well, we can do just that, and also add some music along the way. Let's click on Stage and drag in an on start. This one's for the music. So let's go to Control, and since we want the music to go on forever, let's drag in a forever block and put a start sound until done inside of it. And in here, you can choose your music. I think I'm gonna go with a sci-fi one again. And for me, it's going to be robotic music. Now when we play the game, you can actually hear the music right away. The next thing we are going to do is create another variable. This time, we are going to be keeping track of our time. Now, because you might want to change the amount of time in a game, we're going to set the variable every time it starts instead of resetting it to when it stops. So I'll create a variable called time, and I'll create it, and I will drag on another onStart block. This time, instead of having the timer count down right away, I'm going to click on the screen before the game starts. So when I click on it, that's when the game will actually start counting down the timer. To do this, let's head to Control and find the Wait Until block. It should be right under Forever If. Let's drag that into On Start and go to Sensing again. Then let's wait until the mouse is down, which means wait until we press the screen. And then after that, we are going to start counting down the timer. Let's actually start by setting the timer to 30 seconds. And we want to do this before we click the screen. After we click the screen, we are going to repeat the number of seconds that are in the timer. So in our case, we have a game that goes for 30 seconds. So we are going to count down 30 times. To do this, instead of putting 30 in this bubble, we can actually just drag the time variable in there. That way, if you want to do something like 25 seconds later, you don't have to change this one again. For now, I'll just change this back to 30. That means we are going to be counting down 30 times. And since it's 30 seconds, we are going to change the time by -1. This will make it go down from 30 to 29, then to 28, and so on. And before we actually do that, we want to wait 1 second because it's 30 seconds. Now that you set up your timer, let's actually draw the time and the score for the two players. Let's head to Events once again, and we're going to drag on one more On Start block. So what we want to do here is we're going to wait until the game starts, and then we are going to draw the text that shows the score and time left in the game. Let's copy our Wait Until block. You can do Control or Command C, and then paste it. And then let's drag it onto the On Start. Then after that, let's drag a Forever block because you want the text to always update. And to draw text, we're going to add something called pen. It's like writing with a pen, as you could guess. So we're going to click on More and then find where it says pen. Click it, and once it's green, you can close out of it. You'll see another tab on the left called pen. And what this lets you do is draw stuff on the screen. So what we want to do is we want to draw some text that says the score. So let's scroll down until we find Draw Text. Let's drag this in to the Forever block. And since we want to have Player 1 score, Player 2 score, and the time, let's drag it in 3 times. For now, don't worry about the positions. Let's get the score and time in first. We're actually going to use an operator that joins two things. One is the actual word score, or the actual word time. And then the other one is the number. Let's go to Operators and find this one that has 3 small squares inside them. It must be the one with 3 squares, because otherwise the text won't work. So let's drag that in to all 3 text spots. And for the first one, I want it to say the first player score. And we'll put a space so that way the score won't appear too close to the actual text. Let's do the same thing for player 2. And let's also add the time here. To actually read the score and the time, these are going to be under variables. Let's just drag in P1 score into the third box, P2 score into the third box, and time into the third box. One quick thing about Tynker though. Since it actually has to draw the text, doing it quickly will make it lag. So what we're going to do is head to Control and make it wait a short amount of time after, so that way the game doesn't run too slowly. Let's do something like half a second, so it still draws the text pretty fast. And one more thing, we actually need to erase the previous text before we draw a new text so that they don't overlap each other. Now that we have everything in here, let's play our game. You can see the text is in the middle, but it's all jumbled up and it's very hard to see. So let's change two things. One, let's go drag in a set pen color to white. If you're wondering what this means, don't worry about it. You can just click on it and select a color that you want. And for now, I'm going to set this to X -400, so it'll be a little bit left of the center, and then Y 300. For player 2 score, I'm going to put it at 160 and Y 300. And for the time, let's put it at -90, and let's put the Y at -300. So the time will show up at the bottom of the screen. Let's test the game again. When we click, you can see everything is in the right spot, and also the time counts down. Even better, you can fire some bullets and shoot the other person, and the score will update. However, when the game ends, nothing actually happens. And also, there's no instructions on how to play the game. Let's first add some instructions when you start the game on how to actually play. When we start the game, let's make sure there's no text on the board. Let's drag a clear block into any of the on-starts, it doesn't matter at all. And let's drag a set pen color to white. Now, let's write some instructions in some draw text blocks and place them across the screen. I encourage you to pause here and experiment with some text. What I have will draw some simple instructions in the middle of the screen. Since they're on start, they will happen right when you press the play button, but as soon as you press the screen, it will show the score and the time. So if we run the game, you can see the instructions, and when we press, now you can see the score and the time. And our game is working pretty well. But still, nothing happens when the timer runs out. And also, another problem is you can fire before the game even starts. So let's wait until we click the screen for every on start block. Let's copy it and let's paste it and drag it into every on start block at the very top. That way, nothing will happen in any of the objects until we press the screen. We are also going to create another variable that tells us if the game is active or not. And this is going to be used to check whether the players can fire a bullet or not. So let's just create a variable again and call it active. And this one, when we stop the game, it's not going to be active anymore. So we will reset it to 0. When we start the game, as in when we click on the screen, we will set this to true, or in our case, 1. Set active to 1. And this will tell us that the game is running. But once the timer runs out, we don't want it to be a tie either. So we're going to use a trick that basically just says, wait until it's not tied. Under control, we can find the wait until block again, and let's drag it in under the repeat time. This will happen after the timer is fully done. So once the time is 0, then we'll wait until player 1's score is not the same as player 2's. To do this, let's go to operators, and let's find the not operator. It should say not false on the left side. Let's drag that in, and then let's drag an equals into the word false. This basically tells the code to wait until the left side is not the same as the right side. And what we want to be different is the score of player 1 and player 2. So let's drag these in. And now, once the timer is out, we will wait until it's not a tie before stopping the game. And to stop the game, we're going to use a custom event block. First, let's set active back to 0, or false in our case. And then, let's go to events and find the broadcast block. This basically tells all of the objects that something happened, and that can be your event block or the start of your code list. So let's drag it in, and you'll see what I mean. You can broadcast anything you want to name it. So when the game ends, let's broadcast end, like that. And when the game ends, we want player 1 to hide, player 2 to hide, and the bullets should not be able to shoot. So let's hide the players first. We can just go to the left side where it says events and find when I receive. And you can choose when I receive end. This should be here since you put it in the broadcast block. Basically, when the broadcast block happens, everything under all of these when I receive end blocks will be run. So for the ships, we just want to hide them. That'll be under looks. If we scroll down, you should be able to find hide. And this will make it so that you can't see the ships. All right, let's copy this to player 2. And for the bullets, when we press the D key or the left arrow, we want to check if there's 0 clones, but also if the game is running or not. To do this, we could use another if block, but it's actually better to find the and block. It'll say false and false. Let's drag that in. Basically, what happens for this is if the left side is true and the right side is true, whatever's inside the if block will happen. So for the left side, let's drag in number of clones, bullet 1 is less than 1. And for the right side, we want to check if active is 1. So let's drag in equals, let's go to variables and find active, and we want to check if that is 1. And let's do the same thing for bullet 2. Let's copy this so we can do a little bit less work. Right. Switch bullet 1 for bullet 2 and put this back in. Let's also hide the bullets when the game ends so that they don't keep floating around. Let's copy and paste those rules in. And also, when the game starts, we want to be able to see the ships and the bullets. So let's get an on start and let's find the show block. And we can also copy and paste this into all of our objects. The only thing we have left to do now is change the text at the bottom of the screen to show the time remaining or if either of the players won. To do this, let's head over to Control and find the if-else block. Let's drag that in. There's actually 3 things that can happen, so let's tap the plus to add a third option. So the first thing that can happen is the time is greater than 0 and the game is still running. So let's drag in, draw text time into the first spot. Now if the time is 0, meaning there's no more time left on the timer, we want to draw sudden death if the score of player 1 and player 2 are the same. Let's go to pen and find a draw text block. Let's drag that into both of these. And if they're tied when there's no more time left, let's say sudden death. And if they are not tied, we want to show who wins. We can go to Control and find at the very top if false then else. And let's drag that into the text, actually. Let's go to operators next and find the greater than block. Let's drag that in. And we can copy player 1 and player 2's scores. Now let's drag those in. And what this actually does, this orange block, is if player's 1 score is greater than player 2's score, then we're going to use the first text, which is player 1 wins. If that's not true, meaning player 2 wins, then we'll use this text, player 2 wins. Let's draw this at -92, -300. For sudden death, let's draw it at -152x, -300y. Both of these will appear in the same spot that the time text appears. And to actually check whether the game is still going or not, let's first check if the time is greater than 0, because that's when we want to draw the time. Drag in a greater than block, and let's copy and paste time. So, if the time is greater than 0, this will happen. The time gets drawn. Otherwise, meaning that if this is not true, then it'll check if player 1's score is the same as player 2's score. So let's drag in player 1's score and player 2's score. So now it says if the game is still going, meaning the time is still greater than 0, draw the time. Otherwise, if player 1's score is the same as player 2's score, then draw sudden death. Otherwise, meaning if both of those are not true, meaning the time is 0 and the scores are different, then we will say who wins. If player 1 has a higher score than player 2, then we'll say player 1 wins. Otherwise, we will say that player 2 wins. Now let's just run the game real quick and make sure that everything works. You can see this shows up when you start the game, and we can click to start. We can fire bullets, and we can hit the other player. The scoring works just fine, and so does the animation, the music, and the sounds. If we run out of time, and the 2 players' scores are the same, it should say sudden death, meaning it'll wait until one of the players gets hit. So let's just have player 2 win this round. And you can see, right when that shot happens, player 2's score goes up to 3, and the game says that player 2 wins. Congratulations! That is the end of part 2 for making your own Space Duel game. Next time, we'll code power-ups into your game. These will make your ship faster, your shots faster, and also give you larger shots. So stay tuned, and see you soon.